In 334 BC, the Persian Empire was a massive, established superpower, stretching from Egypt to India. Looking at a map, the mountainous, rugged kingdom of Macedonia, to the north of Greece, looked like a mere geographic footnote. But King Philip II had turned this footnote into a military powerhouse. He united the Greek city-states and completely overhauled their infantry tactics. His signature innovation was the sarissa, an 18-foot pike that gave his soldiers nearly twice the reach of a traditional spear. On the eve of launching a massive war against Persia, Philip was assassinated by his own bodyguard. The throne fell to his 20-year-old son, Alexander. To secure his crown, the young king immediately executed potential rivals and brutally crushed a series of local rebellions. With his home base locked down, Alexander took an incredible gamble. He plunged his 40,000 soldiers across the Hellespont, invading an empire capable of fielding armies twice his size. Outnumbered in deep and hostile territory, Alexander had no safety net. If his army ever lost its forward momentum, it would be surrounded, starved, and annihilated. To keep that momentum, Alexander led from the absolute front. At early clashes like the river Granicus, he plunged his elite cavalry directly into the thickest mass of enemy troops. He fought so close to the action that a Persian noble once split his helmet with a sword, and he only survived because a friend severed his attacker's arm. While Alexander charged, his infantry held the line using the Macedonian phalanx. This formation packed soldiers into dense rows, 16 ranks deep, presenting an impenetrable iron wall of sarissa spear tips that crushed anything in its path. At the decisive Battle of Gaugamela, Alexander weaponized this infantry wall. He used the phalanx to pin the massive Persian center in a brutal grind. Once the enemy was committed, Alexander and his cavalry swooped around the weakened flank. The sheer speed and ferocity of this flanking strike caused absolute panic in the Persian ranks. Seeing the Macedonian king cutting directly toward him, King Darius III abandoned his chariot and sprinted for his life, triggering a total collapse of his army. With Darius in flight, the administrative heart of the empire shifted to Macedonia. Alexander seized the royal treasuries of Babylon and ordered the burning of the ceremonial capital, Persepolis. By the time Darius was murdered by his own desperate governors, his empire had already been systematically dismantled. Alexander had successfully destroyed the Persian state, but ruling tens of millions of new subjects required a total reinvention of his kingship. To hold the territory, he would have to abandon his role as a simple Macedonian general. Alexander began appointing Persian officials to run his provinces. He took Persian wives, adopted the ceremonial dress of his defeated enemies, and began integrating foreign troops into his army to secure his legitimacy. But the cultural breaking point arrived when he demanded his men perform a ritual known as proskynesis, the traditional act of prostrating themselves face down before the king. To his battle-hardened Greek veterans, bowing like this was outright blasphemy. In their culture, mortal men stood shoulder to shoulder. Prostration was a sign of worship reserved strictly for the gods. Alexander was forced to back down, but toxic paranoia began to infect his camp. He started executing top commanders over whispered assassination plots. During one drunken argument in Samarkand, he flew into a rage and murdered Clitus the Black, the very officer who had saved his life at the Granicus River. By demanding total submission, Alexander secured his throne, but destroyed the loyalty of the men who put him there. His pursuit of absolute power was fracturing the foundation of his own army. This internal rot worsened as the geography turned against them. Pushing deep into modern-day Afghanistan and Central Asia, the grand set-piece battles vanished. Instead, the Greeks found themselves bogged down in grueling, bloody guerrilla warfare against local tribes. They had marched thousands of miles over 8 relentless years. When they finally crossed into India and suffered terrifying casualties fighting against armored war elephants, the mental and physical toll reached its limit. At the river Hyphasis, staring down rumors of even larger armies waiting for them to the east, the veterans mutinied. They flatly refused to take another step. Furious and bitter, Alexander had no choice but to order the army to turn around. Persia never managed to build an army capable of stopping him. In the end, the Macedonian war machine was halted by the sheer friction of the Earth's geography and the absolute exhaustion of its own men. The journey back was a disaster, claiming thousands of lives in the desert. In Persia, Alexander's closest friend, Hephaestion, died of a sudden fever. Not long after, while planning his next campaign in Babylon, Alexander himself fell ill and died. He was just 32 years old. He left behind an immense territory, but zero instructions for who should inherit it. Because the empire was glued together entirely by his own terrifying reputation, his surviving generals immediately turned on each other, carving the map into rival kingdoms. In the vicious power struggles that followed, Alexander's Bactrian wife, Roxana, and his young son were both murdered, completely erasing his bloodline. But his political failure masked a massive cultural triumph. His 10-year march initiated the Hellenistic Age. Greek ideas, language, and art flooded across Asia and North Africa, permanently fusing with local traditions. His physical borders evaporated almost as soon as he stopped breathing. Yet the violent force of his conquests permanently rewired the cultural DNA of the ancient world.